Coming up today, the top diplomats of South Korea, the United States and Japan will meet next week to discuss ways to boost cooperation in the face of growing security threats from North Korea. As Chinese President Xi Jinping starts his US trip, the Chinese leader tells the Wall Street Journal that Beijing is firm and clear-cut in its stance that North Korea should abandon its nuclear weapons program. Plus, despite opposition from former communist countries, European ministers agree to share out 120,000 refugees across the EU. The Czech Republic calls it a mistake. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, September 23rd here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, the foreign ministers of South Korea, the United States and Japan are set to meet next week in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Topping their agenda, countering threats from North Korea. Park Geunhye starts us off.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is gearing up to hold talks with his US and Japanese counterparts, John Kerry and Fumio Kishida, next Tuesday in New York. The Foreign Ministry in Seoul says the three officials will discuss cooperation on dealing with security threats posed by North Korea. Yoon is also expected to deliver a brief on the status of inter-Korean relations in the aftermath of the military standoff at the DMZ last month. The three ministers last met in Myanmar just over a year ago, with North Korea similarly topping the agenda. This upcoming meeting, however, comes at an especially critical time as North Korea has hinted at a possible satellite launch. Experts speculate Pyongyang could carry out another nuclear test or missile launch next month to coincide with the 70th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Workers' Party. US National Security Advisor Susan Rice reiterated Monday that the US will not accept North Korea as a nuclear state. The trilateral talks are also being seen as another chance for the US to strengthen ties with Korea and Japan amid the growing influence of China. Tokyo and Washington have scheduled separate talks following up on the military defense pact that was updated in April. Whether Seoul or Tokyo will hold their own talks is another matter. The relationship between the two nations are still tense, as the issue of Japan's stance on its wartime sexual slavery activities remain unresolved. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is revamping Pyongyang's weapons development program. On top of that, he's now apparently replacing older personnel with much younger officials. Song Ji-sun reports.
At a time when North Korea appears to be developing more high-tech missiles and nuclear weapons, it seems like its leader Kim Jong-un is replacing more older officials with officials who are younger by at least a decade or more. The North State Korean Central News Agency reported Tuesday on the officials who accompanied the young leader during a recent visit to a munitions factory. That list includes Kim Chun-seop, and his name appeared after those of Workers' Party secretaries Choi Dong-hae and Kim Yang-gon. The location of his name is an indication of his growing power. Although the report did not state the new official's position, there is speculation that he is the Deputy Minister of Machinery, widely believed to be a euphemism for weapons development. Kim was promoted to North National Defense Commission earlier this year and has seen his career take off since Kim Jong-un took power in 2011. Before that, he was a regional official in charge of a military weapons factory complex. He is believed to be in his late 50s, whereas his predecessor was in his 70s. And he's just one of the many new key aides who have replaced older officials in recent months. Experts say the shift in the weaponry sector to a younger group of officials will continue to meet Kim Jong-un's goal of expediting and reinforcing long-range missile and nuclear weapons development. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is in the United States for his first official state visit to the country. Xi arrived in Seattle earlier on Tuesday for the start of his week-long visit. There, he's scheduled to hold a series of business meetings as part of his economic diplomacy before heading to Washington for summit talks with his U.S. counterpart Barack Obama. Ahead of his U.S. trip, Xi held a rare written interview with the Wall Street Journal. He expressed a firm commitment for denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, describing the issue as intricate and sensitive. Xi pledged to work closely with Washington to achieve the goal through peaceful means. During their summit talks on Friday, Presidents Xi and Obama are expected to share views on North Korea, among other thorny topics. European Union ministers have agreed to share out 120,000 refugees across the EU, despite opposition from former communist countries. Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and the Czech Republic voted against the pan-EU quota system, but they were outvoted by other member states at a meeting of European interior ministers in Brussels. Under the scheme, refugees will be moved from Italy, Greece and Hungary to other EU countries. The plan must now be approved by EU leaders in Brussels on Wednesday. The 4 countries that voted against the plan reacted angrily to the result. The Czech Prime Minister said that only the future will see what a mistake the decision was. Now, it's fast becoming the biggest auto scandal of the year. Volkswagen has now admitted that 11 million vehicles worldwide are fitted with software to cheat emissions tests. The scandal erupted when it was found that Volkswagen rigged US car emission tests. The German automaker says it has taken a $7.2 billion profit hit to deal with the mass recall. Now, shares in Volkswagen plummeted for a second straight day as this scandal worsened. After already falling 19% on Monday, stocks in VW Group dropped a further 18% on Tuesday as the manufacturer apologized for the controversy. Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn, who you can see there, said he is endlessly sorry and is pledging a fast and thorough investigation. Back here in Korea, and President Park Geunhye invited Labour, management and government representatives to her office on Tuesday. She thanked them for reaching a landmark deal earlier this month and pledged that there would be thorough talks with the Labour and corporate sectors prior to implementing the agreement. Lee Soo-eun reports.
President Park Geunhye invited leaders representing labor, management and government to the presidential office of Cheongwadae Tuesday to discuss labor reforms over lunch. The event was the first of its kind since February. Hosting the heads of the Korea Tripartite Commission, the Federation of Korea Trade Unions, the Korea Employers Federation, and top officials like Labor Minister Lee Ki-kwon, President Park promised to remain open to further discussion while reforms are pushed forward. The promise follows the Tripartite Commission's landmark agreement on labor market reforms earlier this month. President Park gave special thanks to the labor union for sharing the burden and difficulties that come with reform.
노사정위원회에서 보여준 그런 어떤 양보, 타협의 정신을 계속 살려나간다면 한국형 노동개혁의 어떤 좋은 모델을 만들 수 있겠다 이렇게 생각이 됩니다.
Though the agreement on reforms still needs approval from Parliament, President Park highlighted that it will give hope to generations of families in Korea, as it is key to relieving youth unemployment. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that story, Korea's rival parties continue to wrangle over reforms to the labour market. The ruling Saenuri Party has vowed to make headway, but they are facing resistance from the opposition party, which says the government's reform drive is flawed. Jim Young-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party vowed to push ahead with a set of proposals to reform the country's labor market, which is President Park Geunhye's stated priority for the second half of the year.
Labour reform is a must in order to revive the economy and create jobs for young people. Our party, the government and the presidential office will cooperate on administrative procedures to revise employment rules and contracts. We hope to make the process more transparent by getting help from experts.
The ruling bloc last week submitted proposed revisions to 5 labor laws that aim to ease the requirements for laying off underperforming workers, establish a wage peak system that gradually cuts senior workers' wages, extend the employment period of temporary workers from 2 years to 4, and expand the coverage for accidents that happen during a worker's commute. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has major objections to the proposed reforms, which the party says will only hinder efforts to create stable jobs.
Making it easier to dismiss underperforming workers, cutting wages, expanding the employment period of temporary workers, these are the labor reforms President Park Geunhye and the ruling party are focusing on. The 5 bills the Saenuri party submitted on restructuring the labor market are flawed.
The opposition bloc also reiterated that it is against any move by the ruling party, which has a majority in parliament, to unilaterally enact the labor reform bills. The MPAD is calling for a separate parliamentary committee to handle labor reform policy and generate more discussion among various interest groups. The Saenuri party, however, contends there has been enough discussion and is urging the MPAD to pass the bills. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the Korean Federation of Trade Unions says it will stage a general strike this Wednesday afternoon to protest against that labour reform bill that was reached, as we heard, during talks earlier this month. The KCTU, which is the nation's second largest umbrella union, said some 10,000 of its members are projected to take part in the planned rally in central Seoul to halt the legislation of this labour reform. The union says the agreement allows for easier layoffs, the lowering of wages and more non-regular workers. Clashes are expected between police and the union, as the government says it will strictly respond to the strike as it views it as illegal. Representatives of labour management and government reached this agreement on key issues to reform the labour market on September 13th after months of discussions. Now, with Chuseok just around the corner, Koreans are bracing themselves for traffic jams that they're sure to encounter as they travel back to their hometowns. Our Lee Ji-won provides us with some information that will come in handy if we are going to take a trip out of town for this long weekend.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport is predicting that roughly 30 million people will travel around the country this year, resulting in 2 more hours of slow traffic than last year. That means it'll take about 7.5 hours to get from Seoul to Busan, usually a 4-hour drive. For those planning to travel by car, the longest travel times for getting out of Seoul will be on the morning of Saturday the 26th. The longest travel times for those heading back into the city will be the next day on Chuseok afternoon, with nearly 7.6 million people expected to be on the road. For those staying in Seoul, public transportation services will be expanded. City bus and subway services will operate on extended hours until 2 a.m. on Sunday and Monday. That's 2 hours later than normal. More taxis and late-night buses will also be running during this period, and express and inner-city buses will run more frequently as well. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, hanbok, or traditional Korean clothing, belongs in the world of high fashion these days, thanks in no small part to designer Lee Young-hee. Our Kim Ji-yeon got a chance to sit down one-on-one with the woman regarded as the pioneer of the modern hanbok.
It'd be difficult not to be captivated by the color and lines of the full high skirt or the long sleeve top called chogori, which make up the traditional Korean dress or hanbok. They're part of a collection by famed hanbok designer Lee Young-hee that goes on display this Wednesday at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza in Seoul. Lee Young-hee is known as a pioneer of modern hanbok design, incorporating an off-the-rack concept rather than the usual custom-fit process. Her innovations to Korea's traditional dress have brought her fame. And it's because of her beautiful designs that she's been named one of the world's top 60 artists in the Google Artist campaign since 2008. But her rise to fame wasn't without hurdles. When Lee first presented her collection overseas in Paris in 1993, many mistakenly referred to her dresses as Japanese kimonos. The shock of this prompted Lee to take on the role of an ambassador of sorts when it came to introducing the hanbok to the international stage of high fashion.
I had this calling that I should let the world see for itself the beauty of hanboks, of Korean tradition, and it paid off. Even in the eyes of Westerners, the hanbok was so beautiful. They were captivated by the movement of the rippling skirt, its colorful hues, and the embroidery.
Her designs gained widespread attention in 2010 after they graced the runway of a haute couture in Paris, drawing top fashion names like Dior, Armani, and Prada. Yi, who touts a 40-year-long career, says her goal now is to present her collections during the haute couture week every year.
I have so many ideas because the development of the hanbok is endless. I want to tell my successors that our traditional culture opens us up to so many possibilities and inspirations.
Traditional patchworks and embroidery, pointed out as items that continuously inspire Yi, are also at display at the exhibition, which runs until October 9th. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, those are stories we have for you on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. Goodbye.